Good evening and welcome to Solutionary TV. I am your host, Dr. Tatiana. Remember that it is our purpose with Solutionary TV to educate about pertinent global issues that are really outside the mainstream narrative, while bringing solutionary guests with proven innovations, practices, and incentives in their strategies for our transitioning society. And in keeping with this goal and this purpose, we have tonight a special guest that I refer to very fondly as the Queen of Serendipity. And as we go into her introduction, you will better understand why that is the case. This evening, we have Dianne Williams. Let me tell you a little bit about Dianne. Dianne's passion is in serving our returning warriors, a very needful passion indeed. And it began when she served as the executive director of a veterans homeless shelter in Massachusetts. That launched Dianne into founding Wellness for Warriors, Integrative Health and Lifestyle, which was a grassroots volunteer organization of professionals from the medical, business, and academia sectors who offered complementary alternative wellness lifestyle solutions for free, fully complimentary for military families throughout the state. Dianne is now the regional coordinator for Connected Warriors, a nonprofit organization that offers free trauma-conscious yoga to thousands of service members, veterans, spouses, and caregivers nationwide on a weekly basis. She currently lives and manages the AOK Farm Shram, also known as the Wellness for Warrior Epicenter in Southern California. Another little piece about this fabulous woman that we have on tonight is that she has well earned the term Queen of Serendipity because her passion and her purpose is always in service to others. She seems to have almost harnessed within herself the magical ability to attract ways with which her needs will be provided for by the ethers, by the universe. And we'll get into that a little bit when we get further in the show. But I would like to offer a warm welcome to Dianne. Welcome, Dianne.
Hi, Tatiana.
It's so great having you here today. I know you have so much to share, and I really want to help everyone understand what's going on with our veterans and what got you involved to begin with. And just to do a little education, which is always our goal, I kind of want our listeners to be aware, in case they haven't heard this in mainstream news, we have some issues with our veterans when they return from various campaigns. Those that are not aware, the statistics, just a few in a snapshot, not to be grim, but to, again, make those aware of what a pertinent need that you're attending to. Statistics are showing that 20% of our returning veterans are diagnosed with PTSD, so they're coming back with substantial trauma or similarly associated mental health disorders. That's significant. 2016 numbers in our statistics show that over 40,000 veterans are listed as homeless. We have a huge homeless epidemic, and I know you're familiar with this as well. 2016, so we haven't even gotten to 2017, our statistics also report that over 20 veterans commit suicide every single day. And obviously when we have so many veterans that are dealing with issues with trauma and with mental health and possibly insufficient services, that's our next statistic. From at least 2007 to 2012, the U.S. Army engaged in a fraudulent scheme to reverse PTSD diagnosis for the purpose of reducing taxpayer burden after the Iraq War. So rather than practice mental health care, the psychiatrists were advocating for the IRS, and the fraud harmed countless veterans that are still lost in our system. And so we're starting to turn some things around. I know that the VA is looking at getting further staffed and better in its development. But in the meantime, if it weren't for individuals like you and your passion and your advocacy collaborating with others, we would have far fewer that were being attended to. So let's just start with what got you passionate about our returning warriors?
I lived it. I breathed it. My husband served 28 years in the military, We were married 23 of it, and halfway through our marriage, he got a PTSD diagnosis, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. He had been a young Marine with an attempted coup in Africa years ago, and it wasn't until he was an EPO, environmental police officer, on the job, and they had to pull a body out of the water, and something tripped up. And I remember that day when he came home, and it was a matter of needing to try to keep his job, keep his sanity, and immediately had to go into overdrive for services. The beauty of it is I was already in the field, so to speak, and already giving services and being resourceful. When 9/11 hit, I had made a commitment and a dedication for the rest of my life to serve those who serve. I never saw myself as a military family because I never lived on a base. I met my husband after Desert Storm. So when 9/11 hit, I became a statistic, essentially, and a military family and a spouse of. And so that put me into action and put me into the community and starting to work with a number of nonprofits and actually starting several nonprofits.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. I realize that when it is a personal impact to one, you realize very quickly if there are insufficient services or if the needs of your spouse and your family aren't currently being met by what's available. And it's a unique perspective, isn't it, to be able to get a bird's eye view into where there are inadequacies and where additional services are necessary. Now,
Right.
realizing that there was a need, you couldn't be a one woman show, even though I know you've got enough energy from that from time to time, given all that you've accomplished. How did you step into Wellness for Warriors, and how did you come about getting the generous contributions through all these collaborative efforts with those that were involved with various forms of holistic and alternative healthcare? Tell us a little bit about how that came into formation.
Okay. Well, we were up in Massachusetts at the time, and when he got the diagnosis, and that's where I learned the difference between a VA and a vet center. And there is a significant difference, although they're both federally funded. I think it's always important to educate people about this. And so because my husband was afraid of losing his job as an officer with a gun, he decided to go to the vet center. It's not as heavily, it's not as bureaucratic and as heavily tracked as a VA. And with that, they tend to do different kinds of programs, and they don't necessarily write prescriptions so quickly. And so he had the privilege of working with a Vietnam vet who had said that it was mandatory to work with this particular counselor to at least try yoga, which was unheard of in my life, because my husband's an old school Marine, and the fact that he went to yoga, and there was, by the third time he was going to yoga, and I had no clue what it was. I said, "What is with this yoga?" And he said, "I don't know. All I can tell you is there's 14 guys from 4 different wars waiting for the teacher." And that was a profound little nugget. Mm-hmm. Now I can look back on, and I would say that that's when it started. And then, and at the same time, I was overseeing the Montechusett Veterans Outreach Center, and I had over 80 veterans, homeless and drug addicted, and they were with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was really the only thing to pick from. So I was able to start to put the two worlds together, bring together the professionals in the neighborhood to come in and speak above and beyond those AA meetings, and that kind of set the precedence and set really the paradigm shift in motion for me, particularly and my family, and of course then I bring it to the community. Yeah. And so then I ended up back down. I for a healthier lifestyle, we finally decided he really did need to retire or hopefully get laid off. And I left ahead of my husband and son and went down to North Carolina in search of a better lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And so that's where Wellness for Warriors became. That was an organization that I started down there. And that, I don't know if you want to ask me a question, you want me to keep talking, but that's a whole nother chapter.
Well, I'm very excited to know how you actually determined what some of these warriors were needing, because it's my understanding from, gathering some information and getting prepared to have you on tonight that, there are certain allopathic and classical services that are available to our warriors through the VA and some of the programs you mentioned. But when you came down to
Okay.
North Carolina, you really shook things up in looking at
Yeah.
a holistic model for the PTSD,
Yeah.
for helping these warriors exit into professions in a way that gave them kind of a peaceable background for themselves and their
Right.
families. You included the whole family. So how did you determine what services were
Well,
missing and how did you go about incorporating them? More than
well,
yoga, I know.
I am going to be honest because that's who I am. And I'm not, and it's not woo woo, it's real. I'm not making this up.
Bring it on.
So I needed to get healthy. I was having health challenges as well. And again, I'm speaking in hindsight. I did not realize I was going to be by myself for at least 6 months before my boy showed up. My son at the time was, I believe he was 14. And my husband, we didn't even know when he was going to be able to join me. So that gave me a window of opportunity for me to get my health together. And I decided to try yoga. And I had the fortune of finding somebody right in my neighborhood. And so with that, I was led to a place called Yogaville in Virginia, Swami Satchidananda's ashram. And so I went there one weekend just to be healthy. I didn't know what it was like to be healthy for a weekend. And this is what happened. I ended up going. I didn't even know how to meditate. I barely knew how to do yoga. And I ended up in a meditation. I ended up in his home, and he had since passed on. And I noticed his house. I was invited to meditate there, and I went into a meditation that was a full-blown movie of war upon war. It's as if it was lifetimes ago, and I just kept seeing maps and war and solutions and more solutions. And when I came out of whatever that was, and I was wondering if they spiked the food, to be honest with you. I came away with Wellness for Warriors, Integrative Health and Lifestyle Solutions. Go do it.
Wow.
And that was it. And so you asked, that's the answer. I was fired up. It became our lifestyle, which is very important because if you consider, being a military firm in the military, there's kind of a protocol that takes place. It's been happening for generations. You do your service, you get out, you hit, and no, not to be disparaging, but typically the VFW or the American Legion, that was typically what would happen for generations. And you might go to the VA, you might not. And so now we have all these young warriors, we have multiple tours going on. And so that paradigm had to break. We had to give them something else in which to land. And so with that came the whole concept of complementary alternative medicine, which I was no stranger to with my own health issues. I understand that all across America, these leading education institutions typically always have a complementary alternative medicine arm to them. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. There's all kinds of associations and organizations. And so that was my goal, was to bring that all together. So when I ended up down in North Carolina and Wellness for Warriors came about, the concept was to bring the medical, academic, and business community together for free on behalf of the military families in our community, because we didn't have a base. We were in Morrisville and Cary. And so there was plenty, and the people that were getting most deployed were the National Guard and Army Reserve by the hundreds in our neighborhoods. And I could only feel for that spouse, whether it be the male or female. There's an amazing amount of females in the military that were in their own neighborhood and not getting services. And so that was my goal. So I ended up joining all kinds of different boards. And again, maybe some of it might have been for my family and selfish, but it turned into our lifestyle, and it's certainly my Dharma now. And with that, I had the privilege of meeting people like you and Dr. Pooja for chiropractor. And I was on enough boards to say, when they would have a yellow ribbon event, I would go out and, we're going to do free yoga for the military. But let me back up. When my husband did finally come down for a visit once, he was really in a crisis because he did actually get laid off. I had wished it and it happened. I love when we didn't see that coming, but it came. So, geez, I wish you could get laid off. The next day he calls, how did you do that? I have an opportunity to, pick up on this. He's the only one that did. But he came down and he was having identity crisis. I remember him pacing in the living room, and I had said, and then the phone rang and I had to take the call, and it was At that time, it was Channel 2, KB something there in North Carolina. Anyway, they had found my Wellness for Warrior group, and that we were doing all these workshops in the neighborhood, and they wanted to do something with this Emotional Life series from Nova. And the essential background of all that is post-traumatic growth. If you've heard post-traumatic growth, that is so empowering. That is as real as post-traumatic stress. I don't know if you realize that. Dr. Tajewski, and he is in North Carolina. The only thing is you don't get reimbursed if you have post-traumatic growth. You get reimbursed if you have post-traumatic stress.
Well, let me pause you right there for just a minute, Diane, because, you know, I want to circle back on a point that you made just now and really accommodate or give you accommodations for taking the incentive. What you said is maybe it was a little selfish because you were doing it for you and your family. You were getting wellness, but how could you sell a bunch of hardened Marines or ex-Green Berets into something as soft and cushy and out of mainstream as yoga if you hadn't come to embrace it and could like be a living example of its power in your life for peace, for stillness, for ease into meditation, for flexibility, getting the joints, you know, lubed. Yet you had to be a living example, and obviously you made this a family effort first. Yes?
Oh yeah, this was very resistant. This was not, well, the fact that John had done it first certainly made the path easier for me. So there was a reversal there, which was great, but it was definitely not embraced. It was certainly not anything, I mean, we would get laughed at when I went to the yellow ribbon events, you know, with free yoga being offered, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So to wrap up that phone call from the Nova series, I said, there's one thing that I would really, and I said I had to go because when my husband, he said, I really wish we had yoga. That's it. I really wish I had my yoga here. And I said, are you serious? Because that's what I will do. And so that's exactly what I did. I called his teacher, asked her if she would be willing to come down. And that time it was called Yoga Warriors. They're still very viable. They're another yoga program for the military, especially with combat stress. And so Lucy Kaminsky, his teacher, had perfected this, had been working on it for years. She came to come down. It was, I think it was like a $10,000 grant that I needed to train 20 teachers who would be willing to go back out into the community. This was unprecedented. This was never done before, and it was handed to me on a silver platter. And I proceeded to just roll with it. And it happened. I was able to, the funny side story is the grant was awarded, and on a Friday, and on a Monday it was taken away because they had scheduling problems with it. And I said, no, you can't take that away. So we ended up going with the local college who had the complementary alternative medicine, and they endorsed it, and the teachers actually came and they paid to be there. They paid $500 each to be trained in Yoga Warrior, and it was a 2-day training. And from there, we were able to roll out classes. Strategically, I decided to align with already existing I would do the YMCA, the USO, and the Red Cross. And so they gave me space, and we had teachers trained, and I was on the boards for the different reserves, Army reserves, and whatnot. And so everybody started to come to the classes, and then they were full. They were overflowing. And the Red Cross had put together a job for me. I had waited for over 4 months for that job, but we'll get to that later, to roll this out statewide. And so I think that answered your question on how did it happen. It happened very organically, and it happened from need. And the beauty of it is they embraced it. I mean, these people, they were stressing out 2, 3, 4, 5 tours. And just needing to be able to breathe just for 1 hour was such a relief for them.
Well, and it's my understanding, and I want you to embellish here, it isn't just yoga you provided for them, which obviously has very extraneous benefits to it. You provided chiropractic, and you collaborated with chiropractors. There was Transcendental Meditation. Tell our listeners a little bit more about those opportunities that came through your program.
I'll give you the short version because there's a lot of magic and miracles around all of it. That's why we know it's a Dharma. And so, Dr. Pooja came forward. She had been wanting to do work with wounded warriors, and we came together over wellness for warriors. That's a dynamic little shift right there alone. There's all wounded warrior, all this doom and gloom, doom and gloom. I'd go to all these, health things on base and stuff. I even went up to wounded warriors and said, "You got to start changing. Just change it. It's wellness for warriors." And that was kind of the precursor as to this big movement, massive movement. And the movement is from within. It's from people really struggling to keep their stuff together. And so it has now become, like goodness, it's been almost 10 years now, a lifestyle choice. It wasn't even a choice at that time. It was a necessity. And so now we're being able to incorporate it ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, that was the yoga. And then we brought it. She would do on the spot acupuncture at these yellow ribbon events, which was kind of funny. Now these are hardcore combat people, and they're all getting all icky in line over the needles. And like, it was really kind of funny, but it was pretty consistent. And Dr. Pooja is absolutely gorgeous. She's like a model, so that didn't hurt. We had lines around the corner. It was wonderful. And then with the Transcendental Meditation, I eased into a lot of it. There was a thing, General Grace Hopper. She had come out years ago. I'd gone to a graduation ceremony at UMass Amherst, and they made this big deal about Miss Grace Hopper. She was a commander of a ship or something. And all she did was come up to the microphone and she said, "Sometimes it's better to say you're sorry than ask permission." And she walked off stage. And I never forgot that. And so I would ease into bringing all this different traditional medicine. But I also would double, triple check and verify that it was evidence-based. I mean, there's layers and layers of evidence, medical evidence-based, supporting evidence on what I did bring in, and the professionals that were willing to do this for free. And so it was really humbling. It was very grassroots effort. And in the process, everybody was getting healthier. And so that was the necessary thing at a community level.
Right.
Any money that was generated went to the USO or to the Red Cross. And so it truly was of service.
Yes. And while you're being so much about your warriors, and obviously you got your home right, you got your husband's needs, probably not 100% ironed out, because life is constantly an act of co-creation and managing that co-creation. But you implemented it at home. You embraced it for yourself and your own wellness, so that you could then also, like you said, manage and nuance some other additional services that you were able to vet, that you were able to do some research on, make sure they were evidence-based, as you already stated, and then offer them to the warriors. How did you get this enthusiasm across to all these other providers to jump on board and offer these services for free? This is where your serendipity starts to bleed in. So I want you to tell our listeners, how do you get people excited about things that really are asking something of them for free, based on the potential of how good it could feel to be of service? Because that's what this is about.
Right. And so, I would have to say that it kind of happened organically. I did get strategic, and I made myself learn how to do a meetup group. I didn't want to do a nonprofit. We had enough nonprofits out there. I just wanted to do a meetup group. I wanted to bring everybody together to the table on their own. And we would offer these workshops out into the public. And then, of course, we would be inviting people through all the different organizations I belong to. And so, there's a lot to be said. When we would have the gatherings, the first thing I would ask everybody is, who has a relative that's been in the military? Who has an immediate family member who is in the military? Of course, by the time you ask 2 or 3 of those questions, everybody's hand is up in the room. That's how it happened. Mm-hmm. We're taking care of each other. We're helping each other at a community level. Yeah. That was just, that was paramount. And let me back up. When those 20 teachers came to learn how to be yoga teachers, that sold out in 3 days, and they came from 10 different states. And the majority of them were active service members, male and female, or recently retired. That's stunning. I mean, that gives me goosebumps. I really, if I get a little emotional, it's because it's just so miraculous how this all happened.
Truly.
Just got to show up. And that's all I knew my job was to do, and it still is to this day. Mm-hmm. And I put my own stuff aside, and I just keep powering through, because that is where the magic begins.
So the magic we know absolutely doesn't go singularly to those that you serve. You know that the universe has got your back. I've heard these stories and I'm really excited to get
So
to
proud of you.
how you've been compensated at times where you kind of knew. I think it's time to receive a little. But before
Yeah.
we go there, again, things align for you. You had an opportunity to leave North Carolina and had a location that was kind of perfectly retrofitted for you to move to the next level in working with warriors, not as much on the PTSD directly or in the wellness protocols, but in helping them reintegrate into society in a way that keeps the work that they've already done really embedded in their psyche and their bodies and in their practices. Let's talk a little bit about the
Right.
AOK farm.
Well, these are tools. These are tools in which they can, I mean, this is again a lifestyle choice. That's why we call it that. And so if I could just back up to, I don't want to leave North Carolina quite yet, because that's where the real magic hit. And you were part of that. And so, yes, this was an interesting, again, it happened, so I can just speak to it. I had been very committed to this, and there was a job availability that was being put together for me at the Red Cross. I was told to wait 4 months for this. And I'm doing the work. I'm doing yoga myself, rolling out the programs, going to roll it statewide. And I went to the meeting, and the executive director was actually crying. He said for the first time in 27 years, he did not get his grant money, and he had to let 10 people go. And right then and there, I took a deep breath because I was out of tricks. I was out of 401k money. I had just done a bankruptcy weeks before. There was nothing in, there was no reserve whatsoever. And the only thing I knew is I was probably going to have to go back to Massachusetts to live with family members, and maybe not even all together. That's how much of a shock this was. But the good news is I was doing yoga. I did know how to breathe now and not overreact. And I took a deep breath and I said, I suspect there's something bigger in store. I have to believe that there's something bigger in store. Now let me be clear. I fired every guide and every every angel, and there was a coming to Jesus meeting, as they call it. And yeah, it brought me to my knees, no doubt about it. But I had already had a wedding that I needed to go to that weekend, of which I wasn't going to go because of the bankruptcy, but one of our relatives had made it possible. And what that did is that put me in Nevada and that weekend with my sister. She flew in so we could spend some time together. And it was a couple of days after the wedding had happened. Now, I don't know how much I should be revealing here other than you and I had had a beautiful session just prior to that.
Yes.
And if you recall, in that healing session, you had asked me what is it that I would want? And I had said, assuming perfect health, assuming that we have world peace, I would like to win a jackpot.
You
Right?
certainly did. You
Recall
certainly
that?
did. And you were in a space to be in receiving, so you were also in a space to claim it, weren't you?
And so I fall out of your office. I go up to, I get essentially, the non-job, and then I roll into Nevada. I said to my sister, I couldn't take the smoke or the people. Let's get up super early in the morning. Let's go try to find our 25-cent Wheel of Fortune. We had no right gambling, by the way. And so we did just that. And long story short, we ended up going to a place called the Silver Legacy. I walked up to the bank of, oh, there it is, the Wheel of Fortune. I walked around. There was 6 of them. And I don't know, I have no other way to say it. The voice came from the back of my head, out my mouth. This is it, the red, white, and blue machine. She put in $10. I put in $10. It was 75-cent maximum bet. It was the 3rd spin. Everything happens in threes for me. I now know. And we hit the progressive jackpot.
Yes. Woo!
$268,000. Right. And
That's right.
so the woman with the fake check showed up like hours later. Now, I would have never put this together. And this is important information, people. Listen up. And she said, you wouldn't believe the synchronicity. Well, it's kind of my middle name because I've been doing a lot of soul work. I've been doing a lot of growth. I get it. And so, no, that's my middle name. She said, well, today is 7/11/11. Okay, July 11th, 2011. Okay. No, in the numeric world, those are very lucky numbers. There's also something called the 11/11 phenomenon, which is true, and I live by it. Look it up yourself. You know it. And then she said, but you won at 4:44 in the morning. That's a sign of the angels. And I said, who do you think whispered in my ear? And so, yes, very blessed, very much coming from my personal desire ever since I was a young girl is peace. Just peace in our hearts, peace in our families, peace in our community, peace in the world. As hokey as that sounds, that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it took all of this to discover that.
Right.
It took all of that. And so you wanted the story, you got it. No, that's North Carolina. It was the last of the money. And we were kind of out of tricks. My husband was having a tough time. He wanted to take a federal job. He had always wanted a federal job. That's part of the scene when you leave the military. They tend to want to go be cops or prison guards. There's just this MO that happens, but we're changing that. And he wanted that federal job, and he got it. And he got it way up in Winnemucca, Nevada, which was nowhere I was going. And so in the meantime, our son was graduating, and I needed to make sure he did not want to go to college. So I said, all right, so last of the money, this is what we can do. It was Archie's Acres, and it's a Veteran Sustainable Agriculture Program here in California. Said I got just enough money to move us out. Dad can go land where he needs to go, and we're all going to figure out how to run a bed and breakfast someday and have our own hydroponic organic growing. So that was the plan when we left North Carolina, and it was the last of the money that got my son through that class. He ended up working there. He's still in that industry. I ended up working there. I ended up being a counselor for the veterans that had gone through the class. Who knew?
So I just have to take this moment because you're just not giving yourself quite enough credit. There you go, Diane, again with it being about serving others and making sure that their needs are met. I want to remind you, I know you know this, but our listeners need to hear it, because when we talk about being able to manifest something as substantial as a large organization or a program that's funded, that receives grant money, that attracts a lot of our members of society that are in need, like our veterans, we need to help others to be empowered to realize they don't have to know all the hows. They don't have to figure out every detail. You figured out a lot of the things along the way. And what you've just pointed out, when you got real caught up in taking care of others, you'd reached a point where you hadn't really focused too much on your own basic needs, your own financial, monetization of the programs that you had done. And what I recall in that session that you had with me, and many of my listeners know that I'm also an intuitive coach and spend a lot of time in teaching and training and authoring books, you did something very specific. When you knew it was your turn to receive, because of how that session was providing, you walked out of my office declaring you were going to win a jackpot. And not only did you declare it, you worked all the ways through that others might have shrouded around them. In not being able to receive a large sum of money, because a lot of us actually have more fears about receiving large sums of money than we realize. And you worked it completely through, marched straight down the hall and said, I'm headed to Nevada and I'm in my lucky stream, and I'll tell you how it goes on the other end, but I'm going to win a jackpot. And you were in my office 2 to 3 weeks later with a pretty cool story for me. And not only that, you walked up to that machine, as I recall, and you called it on the third pull and said, just drop it on that progressive pull. Did you not?
Yeah. Just let it go.
You...
But I said that at every machine I ever tried. I just haven't decided to give that time. I don't know what to tell you. I was as surprised as the next person. We were down to our last $10, so it was kind of funny, but not really. Not really. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to look at all this stuff in hindsight now, but
yes.
I don't know. I was heading back to Massachusetts. I was out of tricks. And so what that allowed me to do was continue to do Wellness for Warriors for Real, pay myself a couple of $100 a month, fix our car situations, put a little money away, which got us out to California.
Right.
And so, not all that money came. We got less than half, and then I split it with my sister. So it dwindled down pretty quickly, but there's no complaining there. Very grateful. Mm-hmm. It did get me back on my feet enough to wrap up the business we needed to wrap up in North Carolina, but a lot of those programs are still happening. Mm-hmm. We brushed over the Transcendental Meditation. That was a whole nother little vignette. I'll just be quick about it. But things happen again in threes. So within a 24-hour time, the TM came across my field. And so I said, fine, I'm going to look them up. And I sent an email and I said, okay, who are you? What are you? Like, I want to know who they are. They've been around forever. But I knew that they had a very progressive veterans program, and people were asking for meditation. I got a call immediately, and the woman said, hi, I'm Dianne Williams. I said, no, that was my maiden name. She goes, no, that's my name. Isn't that great?
There
I
you
mean,
go again with that synchronicity right in front of your face.
This all day long. And she said, well, you know, it's a funny thing. We just got your email and we just got out of a meeting. We just got a grant to be able to provide transcendental meditation for X amount of combat vets. I couldn't remember how many and their spouses. But we don't know how to reach them.
Oh.
And there you go. And that's that story. And I think we did well over 50 people at that
That was
point.
a perfect marriage of Dianne Williams with passion, was it not? She was kind of your in-earth doppelganger, and all you had to do was come together and meet and put the grant and the education and the meditation with the eagerly awaiting warriors, yes?
Right. And so there was no money happening. I did do one big event at Duke University for some for combat counselors. And we put together a beautiful arrangement for all kinds of holistic stuff. Again, massage, acupuncture, even kayaking, all kinds of beautiful things. And in the process of looking for all those people to come together, they would all help each other out. And then the next thing was happening on its own.
Right.
And the police department started to become involved. First responders were becoming involved. And it was very organic, a beautiful thing. A lot of that stuff is still in place. As a matter of fact, Apex is a yoga garden. They're still doing yoga warriors. She's a trained teacher now down in Apex, Margaret. And so, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about that. I forgot about all that.
You really left a legacy behind you in North Carolina, starting on the Upper East Coast, right? Massachusetts benefited by some of the work and the on-the-grounds implementation, and then you took it south, and it really blossomed. And I'm sure it has touched countless lives. I know that you felt pulled to come to California. I know that seeing warriors being able to reintegrate in a very holistic way was equally important to you. Tell us a little bit about Archie's Acres and the AOK farm and how you saw the successes.
I had seen them on TED Talk. I had seen them on a TED Talk. I showed Pooja. I showed other people it. And somebody came up to me after an event one night, and it was an event I made myself go to. I was in a very sad state of affairs. I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen. And she tapped me on the shoulder. She said, "Are you Diane?" I'm looking for Diane Callan. Oh, that's me. At the time I was Callan. And she said, "I have a message for you. You helped some veterans that are out in California learning how to do organic, and you need to go." Well, that didn't even occur to me, but it was a great idea. And so my son didn't want to go to college. I didn't know what to do. We were in a little bit of a mess there, trying to figure out what we're supposed to do with each other. And I said to my husband that night, "I think we just need to do this," and he agreed. We knew we were out of solutions at that time, or we felt this was the next thing to do. And so I was afraid Zachary was going to say no, and he said yes right away, which I thought was interesting. And then I got confirmation. It's worth mentioning. I went to get the mail after my son says yes when I expected a big fight. I didn't get one. I get the mail. There's a VFW magazine, which I never look at them. It was for my husband. Right on the front cover, Self-Sustainable Agriculture. I opened it up, full page spread, Archie's Acres. Done. I gave away everything I owned. I got a small truck. I had some friends drive out. I flew out and we moved.
That's right.
And that's getting out of your own way. That's getting out of fear. And that's just knowing you're provided for when you're coming from a place of pure intention.
Yes, and trusting that the confirmation is right in front of you if you just will get out of fear and open your eyes, right, Diane?
Everything's a sign to me. That's why I have to have them confirm it 3 times in 24 hours, because everything's a good idea sometimes, and it does get exhausting. So here we are.
Tell us a little bit about AOK. Tell us what the biggest successes have been in watching these guys get into aquaponics, hydroponics, and organics.
Organics, yeah. So that's what we learned at Archie's Acres, and I do say we, my son and I. And then somewhere along the line, because I worked there, one of my jobs, we get all kinds of offers from different people that had land and farms, and they wanted to give it to the veterans or have the veterans run it. And it would always get into the legalities, and someone would get hurt. So we decided not to necessarily do that quite as often. And I called just to say thank you. The owners of this farm that they had in Escondido, they wanted to have a veteran run it, and I said thanks, but no thanks. And within a minute, we had the owners of this property. She says, "Where are you?" I said, "Fallbrook." "Oh, I raised my kids there." I said, "Where are you?" She said, "Morrisville, North Carolina." Like, I just came from there. And then you stop what you're doing and you say, "What do you have?"
Right.
Because you can't you can't monkey with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I needed to be was on a 10-acre avocado grove that's 45 years old in the middle of 3 lung surgeries. But my son wanted it so bad, that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am. And so this particular property, and you've been to it, allows me to have 3 different guests. And at first I was working with combat vets off of Camp Pendleton. But then it got to be too much. It was 24 hours on. And so now I don't necessarily do the combat vets here at the home, but I still do support them quite heavily at Camp Pendleton through Connected Warriors, which is free yoga, trauma-sensitive yoga for the military.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's on Camp Pendleton. We just rolled out 4 classes, and then last week another class, a private class, where we had 38 Marines at 6 o'clock in the morning, dark, they call it, with no electricity, and they just pulled up the cars, put on the lights. We were out in a bay. It was the first time I've even met these guys and gals, and said, "How many of you have done yoga?" 2 hands go up. And this teacher kicked their butt for 1 hour later, man. And the sun came up, and they were all sweating, and they loved it. And then I said, "Okay, now how many of you have done yoga?" And there was 36 of them. So 36 hands goes up, but 72 hands went up, and then a hoorah came out.
Oh.
And that's a dream come true.
Yes.
Yeah. It's one thing to wish it. It's another thing to have it happen. And that was last Tuesday.
And all of these lives being changed, empowered, opportunities for healing, wellness, new practices can't take place if there isn't some dream visioning on the part of individuals like you, Diane. You've got to realize, just like they've said, we've got the Transcendental Meditation. How do we find the warriors? We've got grant money. How do we find people that are willing to run the programs? Right. So in every step of the way, it takes individuals that are coming from a lot of selflessness, a lot of passion, an absolute unwavering drive and purpose to make others' lives better. And your niche, your area of focus is this warrior, this returning veteran, these families that are impacted by serving our country in the fullest of ways. And what those losses are, like you said, is it post-traumatic stress or is it post-traumatic growth? Well, it can be growth if we can become strong from it, correct? If we can grow muscle from it and we can grow interior character.
Just given that option, when I speak in front of groups on base and stuff, just even saying post-traumatic growth, they kind of like, what? And the fact that they even have the option, and it is you can have both, but you can't have it in the same minute. You can have it within 5 minutes of each other, but at the same exact time. And it can be, post-traumatic growth can be as damaging too. That's when you're on overdrive and just going to the wall constantly and not recharging and not doing, people that are amped up just doing physical because they're in this fight and flight mode, which tends to happen with these veterans. They just stay amped up. They're just buzzing around for years. And instead of getting the mind, body, emotion connection down pat and realizing that they have control over these mechanisms, that they can actually rewire their fight and flight response just from breathing, breath to body movement for 1 hour on a mat. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is scientific based, and this is not woo-woo. It's not religion. That's the beauty of it. That's why I like working with Connected Warriors, because we're able to have made it mainstream now. Mm-hmm. And so what we used to get laughed at the Yellow Ribbon events in North Carolina, now Pendleton's calling me. How cool is that? And this is being incorporated in wounded warrior organizations throughout America, and the Intrepid Center is one of them. They are unprecedented medical facility for our warriors, and I think they have two of them now, one in Texas and one up in Washington. And so they have libraries. I mean, they're even bringing the new boots, as they call them, or new recruits in with mind body emotion assessment.
Really?
And yes, yes, yes. It has shifted, and they're screening them more on the upfront end of the business because they know the damage that they've been doing. And this is from going, and even Pooja can speak to this as well. We had gone to a couple of different resiliency events up in Washington, and it was full of generals. Man, there was brass everywhere and stars everywhere, and every one of those people that got on that stage, Pentagon level and more, were all talking about the same thing. Love, kindness, and compassion. I'm not kidding you. And they had breakout rooms doing yoga and meditation and I rest, which is yoga nidra, but they have to call it I rest so the VA will take it. Which I'm living in so many different worlds. And the good news is there's this counterculture in the military and the need to take care of each other and take care of themselves, and then taking care of each other, and now incorporating this into our lifestyles. And it's a beautiful thing. And had I not been part of it, had I not witnessed it myself, I did not think that I would have Pendleton calling me in my lifetime, and they have. That's how fast this paradigm shift has taken. That's how committed everybody is.
So what I'm hearing you say is that what started out as a singular goal to help remedy your own husband's PTSD and then evolved into working with returning warriors and their families really now is a preemptive, a practicum that's being given to soldiers at Camp Pendleton in preparation for them going into combat, in preparation of them coming into their full duty station. It's really come full circle, hasn't it, Diane?
Hasn't it? I don't know. I don't make this stuff up. I can tell you there's been many times because my personal health is challenged at times. I was just in the hospital 8 weeks ago, and I thought for sure I was a goner again. I've died more than once, and they kicked me back. And I'm like, and right back to Connected Warriors and Wellness for Warriors. There was a whole docket of things for me to do when I got back.
Well, it appears that the hereafter cannot have you yet, that you are still in demand, front and center, and that the gifts that you're giving to our warriors are still evolving. I want to talk about how the universe has got your back again, Diane, if you're ready to play there, because when it comes down to being a philanthropist without the checkbook to be a philanthropist, which some of us have been, those of us that have big passion, big purpose, we want to give, we want to educate, we want to create alternatives, we want to make people aware that there are alternatives on the ground. You put the TM people with the soldiers. We need those that are actually bringing the best of all worlds together so that the deliveries are there.
I do want to give you a little story to the side. It's a good story, though. Okay, so did you ever hear the song Dear Prudence for the Beatles?
Of course, yeah.
Won't you come out to play? Hey.
Right.
Okay. The story behind that is Prudence Burns was a follower of Maharishi when the Beatles came out to Rakakish. And she was so close to divine that Maharishi had asked John Lennon to go get Prudence. And Prudence didn't want to come out. She's like, no, I want to keep meditating. I'm so close. So close. And that's where that song is. Won't you come out to play? So Maharishi came to Prudence and John Lennon. And at that point, he decided these Westerners that keep coming over to India cannot just lock and load straight into meditation. They couldn't handle it because they were just losing their stuff. And so that kind of changed the dynamic. But as the story goes, and because she's one of my mentors, she's a real person. And Maharishi asked her and put her on assignment for the Vietnam vets that were returning, that she was to teach them Transcendental Meditation and asanas, which is the physical movement of yoga, which was unheard of. It's really, even for Maharishi to have had that combination. That's what he said was necessary. And so she was able to do that all over America back in Vietnam era. And she could do Transcendental Meditation anywhere you wanted, and any place he came sold out. And it didn't matter what VA or what base. She could not mention yoga or she'd be kicked off. So now the funny thing is, here I am essentially doing the same thing, in some very roundabout way, but that is truly what's going on here. And I can go onto any base or any installation and do yoga, connected warrior yoga, but I can't be pulling in TM,
Oh,
Transcendental Meditation, because
fascinating.
they feel that it's too, it's a religion or whatever they want to consider it. So, however, TM can be taught through the VA of all things as an evidence-based test,
Hmm.
so that they have these blind studies, and so those are the ways in which our guys can actually still, and gals can actually still learn TM through the VA.
So we've learned how to get around the systems and some of the closed doors by changing the
Yeah.
vocabulary a little bit.
Hmm.
And obviously that's been effective because you're doing it. It's
Hmm.
absolutely been implemented, and I know that you're excited about what's happening with Pendleton. Now let's talk about how the universe has you
All
back
right.
again,
I
because
got you. You
you've
keep
had
me on
many
point,
miracles,
girlfriend.
and we've barely even touched on them, but
Yes,
we're running low on time. So
right. So all
I
right, let's
want the
talk.
folks to hear that when you went into kind of an awareness state, a reflection state of, I really need some things to flow in my direction again,
Right.
financially,
Okay.
and to take care of my health and maintain
Right.
myself.
Right.
You had this serendipitous, again, opportunity to do what? Tell our
It happened in
listeners.
the hospital. When I was I went to the hospital. I thought I had food poisoning. I ended up there for 4 days. I ended up having a lung infection again that spread to my entire body. It was very dangerous. Uh, at at one point, they had put me on morphine, and so I had put onto Facebook, "I need prayers," which is not something I normally do. Mhm. It's something I need to learn. We need to learn boundaries and letting other people help. Correct?
Of
So
course.
anyway, because of that, one of my Connected Warrior teachers, who was a naval officer, picked up on it, and he texted me. He said, "I'll do yoga nidra if you want." Now, what that is a full body meditation. But we have to call it eye rest when you're dealing with the military. And I said, "Well, you better hurry up because they just gave me morphine." So he called right away. And so within 2 minutes, I had gone to I don't know where, had a big meeting with I'm not quite sure who, that had decided that, I've got more work to do. And I said, "Well, then you have to help me with my health and you have to help me with finances." Essentially was kind of what took place. And so I'm in and out of remembering it, but the point is, I did get home. I did have all of a sudden, Pendleton's calling, this one's calling, that one. So I've got work to do while I'm recuperating. And it occurred to me that I had a little gold mine that I could turn in, and that was presented to me as well. And what that was it's a signed Newsweek. I actually have one here. In 1988, I worked for Lotus Development for 14 years. In 1988, software industry, hardware industry. And it was when Steve Jobs had just been ousted from Apple. He came to Lotus to unveil the next computer. And I didn't have the words for it then, but at that time, I had intention to meet Steve Jobs. So much so that I asked my girlfriend if only have to be to sit me up front when he was going to unveil it. And I went and got mints at the store, and then I bought all these magazines because he was on all these covers. And he did this big fanfare unveiling of the next computer. It was teleprompted around the world. The press was all over it. And he did not sit in the chair that was next to me. He sat even closer on a table. I didn't know what to do. I froze. And I fanned out the new magazines and said, "Would you sign one of these?" And he said, "I don't do autographs." He was really kind of persnickety. And I said, "I don't even know where this came from. It's that same voice that was from the back of my head out my mouth." "Well, why don't you write something from your heart?" And he lit up. He took the pen out of his pocket and he picked the Newsweek. This is it right here. There's a little vignette, right? It's
Show
just
our
a copy
people,
of it.
Diane.
And what it says is, and this is what he did, he wrote, "I love manufacturing." He hesitated, he underlined love. He hesitated, and he wrote Stephen Jobs. And this is highly, highly collectible. It's been in a bank vault for too long now. I think because of the way things are going here, it's time to let it out. Let the Kraken out. What he represented was anything far above anything. It's everything we're talking about. He truly loved what he did. He brought humanity gifts that we could never ever have ever imagined,
Yes.
that make
Yes.
us productive and hit the story, his real story. And then people say he was this, he was that. That's nice. I know who Steve was, and Steve was all about love,
Yeah.
and he was all about humanity. Not necessarily a philanthropist, because his gift was in his inventions and his ability to create teams and co-create. It's all the same stuff, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I've decided to let this go to auction. It's our auction. It's going to be the third week of October. And you want to talk about magic? Every single day, I have just crazy phone calls, all kinds of people that own and run all kinds of nonprofits and companies that are inquiring about this now. I've had the privilege to look to see what Silicon Valley is all about. And the philanthropy up there is by the billions of dollars. They're saving people's eyesight. They're wiping out polio. We're talking Bill Gates, all those people that started Silicon Valley and all the nonprofits that they backed up, and they still do today.
Mm-hmm.
Google and even Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg or whatever that is. He's got stuff going on. So I'm in the middle of all this beautiful recreation.
Mm-hmm.
We just keep recreating, and that's the stuff I continue to focus on, and the people I continue to work with.
Well, we are excited to support there being the utmost momentum for the sale at this auction, so that it is a blessing to you, so that it continues to forward your work and sustain all of your financial needs and that of the AOK farm and these wonderful warriors. I will have that constantly going into perpetuity until that actually goes to auction through Solutionary TV on the Facebook page.
Oh, thank you.
Can you tell our listeners how to reach some of your programs? If you can just give them a couple of websites and ideas, that would be great.
Well, there is a main website. Connected Warriors is based out of Boca Raton, Florida. And so I think there's over, 500 classes a week being run. So it's connectedwarriors.org. And then out here in Southern California, I have the Connected Warriors Meetup Group. And I think I have 8 classes going right now that are to the public. But my intention is that this sells for over $1 million. I'm being very clear about that with my guides and angels, so that I can commit 20% to warrior wellness programs, to include TM, Connected Warriors, and others. And so that is my intention, and we will see what the universe wants to deliver. And no matter what, I'm okay. You can't get attached to the outcome, right? We get it. I get it.
Do you have just a few parting words, Diane, when you talk about being focused and you go from, I'd like world peace and I'd like to win a jackpot to I'm winning a jackpot and this is the one and this is the pull and this is the Dianne Williams I'm supposed to talk to and this is the AOK farm that shows up in the spread. Tell people how you get to that level of certainty.
I'll tell you, there is no level of certainty whatsoever. You need to listen. It's called instinct for men, intuition for women, and we need to get quiet enough to listen. And like I said, I got a rule with my guys. I need 3 hits because everything's a good idea to me. I need 3 confirmations, and they're pretty consistent with that. So like even with the Steve Jobs thing, the reason why I let it go is it's our auction, and the 100 other items are John Lennon's coat. I don't know, Jimi Hendrix signed Woodstock poster. But Steve Jobs gave John Lennon's son one of the first Mac computers, and Andy Warhol was in the room. One of the other items in the auction is Andy Warhol's something.
Wow.
I mean, I can't make this stuff up. And so you just gotta listen. And that's when I decided to pull the trigger, because there was enough indication to me that this is the direction in which to go. Now, listen, it's not smooth sailing all the time. Do not get me wrong. It's brought me to my knees enough times to tell you that it's about perseverance. It's about believing and having faith and being hopeful. Yes. Love, kindness, compassion. I hope I'm not on a soapbox, but that's the bottom line. And yes, you get curveballs left and right. Do not get attached to the outcome. Listen, the year I won that jackpot, I had put on at New Year's, I wrote, I needed to be financially independent. I thought it was over a job, but that's not what it ended up being.
Right.
Because I lost that job. I put everything on that job, and it never materialized. And it brought me to my knees, but I didn't let it take me out. I insisted on having a good time with my sister for 2 days. I put everything on hold. I don't know. I have no other way to describe it other than to say that's what I know happened.
No, you're a living example of it, Diane. And we're right at the hour, so I just want to acknowledge your service to others, and your compassion appears to be limitless. I see the universe being equally limitless in its generosity in compensating you. We're going to hold that vision for you. And
Thank
you
you.
are a perfect
Thank you.
example of the tenets of Solutionary TV. I want to say to our listeners, remember, you are the solution.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.